Hello everybody, my name is Kyler Horn and I am the head coach for speech and play production in Mullen, Nebraska at Mullen High School. This is going to be my third season coaching speech and I still have a lot to learn. I wanted to extend to any new coming coaches that this can become overwhelming. Oftentimes there's a lot going on, there's so much to learn and a lot to fit in such a small season. However, I wanted to let you know that you are not alone. Our great state has an amazing community of coaches who are more than willing to help. So if you see anybody in these videos that you think might be able to help you, or even try reaching out to a local coach, we are more than willing to be there, and every question deserves to receive an answer. So, without further ado, let me provide some answers on the platform speaking event Informative Speaking. So the first question is, what exactly is this event? Well, Informative Speaking is one of our more straightforward events, as it is exactly that, with the intent to inform the audience. While you may try to create audience buy-in with entertainment or other impressive qualities, the overall intent of the speech needs to be to inform. So, what are the general rules of this event? Well, first and foremost, the informative speaking event has a time limit of 10 minutes. Anything exceeding the 30-second grace period will result in the lowering of one rank. Another rule is that only one 4x6 note card is permitted in informative speaking. If a bigger note card or multiple note cards are used, the student can face disqualification. Visual aids are an integral part of informative speaking as it gives the audience a way to visualize the information instead of having to take on the full mental load. However, these are not a required aspect of informative speaking as an event. The other rule to keep in mind is that students must be performing an original piece. If not, they once again face disqualification. So, how can coaches find success for their students in this event? First and foremost, it is imperative that students are bought in on the topic they are presenting. If they are confident and passionate in what they have to bring to the table, the audience will immediately have a sense of buy-in as they too get this feeling of confidence and passion. The second way is to decide on the best organizational pattern for the topic. We have chronological, which is walking somebody through steps or through history and time. You have topical, which is 3 separate subpoints of a topic. Or you also have spatial, which kind of explains the layout of a situation. As just previously mentioned, looking at the number of points you bring is essential to the audience as it can become either overwhelming or leave them feeling like they didn't get enough information. I always aim for 3 points. That's not a rule. Usually it's 2 to 4 points, but 3 is kind of the sweet spot as it gives the overall perfect balance. The final thing is to practice, practice, practice. I know this is obvious. Sometimes our kids say it's obvious, but do not always commit. However, it's important to focus on the fact that you cannot make them practice. Making a student practice is not going to be as beneficial as them wanting to come to practice. So I try to make them as fun yet streamlined as possible because you can only give a speech so many times in a day. So next, what is the process of developing a speech in this event? As mentioned, student must have buy-in on the event. They must want to inform audiences on this topic. And as much as you don't want to have to agree to it, the audience also has to be able to buy into it. So when creating these topics, we need to understand what our demographic we're speaking to is going to be, how they're going to view it, and other ways that we can bring them into it if it doesn't immediately apply to them. One of the ways is through audience adaptation sentences. Because if we're giving a speech on a Generation Z experience, our audience is not all going to be Generation Z. However, we do all know or love somebody who is. So just by throwing in that little tidbit, we can ensure that all of our audience is encompassed in our topic. Another one of the, in my opinion, most influential parts of a speech is your opening, catching that audience attention. You can do this through setting a scene, telling a story, asking a question, giving a quote. No matter what it is, it does need to relate directly back to your topic. And I enjoy when it's tied back into the closing of the speech, as it gives you that well-rounded feeling. I had a student in previous years that set a scene that really grasped the attention of everybody in the audience, and then she closed with how we ended up in that scene. So it totally depends on the student. If you've got a great storyteller, great person to use that on. If they're not the strongest in telling stories, we know we can start with questions. So take into account what the student wants, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and then build from there. The other essential part is to ensure that your thesis is so painfully obvious. While that in itself seems obvious, we hear these speeches every day at practice, every day at competitions. You know, we've heard them a million times, and we all dread the hated note of missed the thesis, not sure, those kind of notes. So just plainly stating it will help the audience be on board, the judges be on board, because we know it. We've heard it a million times. But for new ears, we need to make sure that they know exactly what they are going to be learning about so they can apply that knowledge in a way that's beneficial. I also like to ensure that my students are giving a credibility statement. Why can they speak on this topic? Have they done their research? Something as simple as just stating, due to my extensive research in this field, already puts them a step above, as it shows that they have hopefully backed up their words and done that research. And finally, we have transitions. These can really build up a speech or have the opposite effect. Now, there are many different types of transitions. You have sectional. Now that we understand blank, let's take a look at blank. We also have nonverbal, such as hand movements, walking placement, any kind of body change, and something that's not verbal. We also have internal. Let's reflect on what we've just discussed before we move on to. And then we also have signposts. First, second, third. These have their place in speaking events. I do not personally like to use them in informative, as I think it really chops up the segments. However, I have seen very successful speeches utilize signposts. And overall, as something I like to implement with my students, is to outline. Now, I know this may not be a very well agreed upon tactic, but I've noticed that a lot of my students become overwhelmed when they're looking at a script, and as soon as they miss one word, they don't know what to do. They're frozen. They don't know how to work back into that point. So by just working off of an outline, we can ensure that we are getting rid of those scenarios where we are frozen because of a simple mistake. Hopefully, I haven't thrown too much information at you. I myself should have created a bit of a better outline to prepare myself for this, as you can tell that the passion kind of comes through and I get on a roll. However, I do want to share a couple other tidbits of advice that I believe are important for this event. If you are utilizing visual aids, it is important to find balance between the material of the speech and the actual utilization of visual aids. Having them stand there the whole entire time only to be used every other minutes, it actually becomes more of a distraction than it builds to your speech. Also, if they are overly complicated, it can become hard for the speaker and the audience as they're trying to mess with them and give the speech, also creating a distraction. So, depending on the speech, you are going to have to focus on how you can implement it in a more seamless fashion, and it's also important that students know how to do so without turning themselves away from the audience, as this kind of snaps the audience and the speaker out of the actual speech that is being performed. One last piece of advice that I use for students is that if a source cannot be used twice to back up their information, it's not a solid source. This is not agreed upon by some, especially when it's an amazing source that might actually give you a bit more credibility, yet if you are only taking a little tidbit of it, how true is it to the actual topic, right? So my personal rule is that if my students cannot implement it more than twice, it's not a good enough source for us to utilize. Now, before I close off this video, I think it is important to remind you that a lot of what I have given in this video is my own personal findings and opinions. What I find useful and successful for my team might not be implemented as easily for others. It is okay that we all take these events in different strides, and honestly, that is what makes speech so fun, as we are constantly seeing new ways of performing, new ways of bringing topics to others' attention, and overall just working on our ability to communicate, especially if we don't see eye to eye. This is a world that not a lot of people have great experience in, but because of NSAA sanctioned events like speech, we can ensure that our students learn how to create these moments and know how to progress through them in a way that benefits all. I would like to thank everybody for taking the time to watch this today. Hopefully, I've given some ideas, and like I said, please do not feel afraid to reach out. I do recommend, if anybody needs to get some more information, to read this textbook. It's no longer in print, so you can't buy it straight from the publisher, but look in secondhand stores. Amazing, amazing topics, information on both persuasive and informative, and honestly, a good little look into the digital age of communication.